news source.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips.
And I'm Terry Martin. We've got some breaking news right now. Any moment, we're expecting to learn the verdicts in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. We're taking a live look right now at that courthouse in Fairfax, Virginia, where the trial took place and where the two captivated the nation with their weeks-long battle in court.
And as we wait, here's Will Reed with a look at where things stand now after 3 days of deliberations.
Johnny Depp back on stage with Jeff Beck in London, receiving a standing ovation from the crowd. This comes as jurors in Depp and Amber Heard's multi-million-dollar defamation trial are taking their time, pausing deliberations to ask the judge for clarification Tuesday afternoon about whether they should take the headline or the full article into account regarding Heard's Washington Post op-ed.
Question is, does question number 3, the statement is false, pertain to the headline, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath, or does it pertain to the content of the statement, everything written in the op-ed?
The judge determining
the statement is the headline, and not the entire op-ed.
This all centered around a 2018 Washington Post op-ed Heard wrote where she called herself a public figure representing domestic abuse.
It's insane to...
All right, let's go straight to the courtroom in Virginia. Here are the verdicts in the Johnny Depp-Amber Heard trial. The jury coming in now. They are rising for the jury, as is the custom. Johnny Depp is not in the courtroom. He had a previous commitment in London. They've bickered about that on social media, as about so much else. But here is the moment of truth, as the jury, which heard all the evidence from both sides, in Johnny Depp's claim that Amber Heard defamed him, in Amber Heard's claim that Johnny Depp defamed her, in statements and in an op-ed in the Washington Post. The jury heard it all, spilled out in that courtroom. A lot of misery, a lot of fighting, and here's the moment of truth, the verdicts from the jury.
If I could have the attorney's approach for a moment.
That's interesting.
All right, so there, obviously, the judge calling a sidebar before the reading of the verdict. I didn't see whether she had received them already. There's a verdict form that the judge will review before the verdict is announced. There you see Amber Heard. As I said, Johnny Depp in London right now.
Just to give a little background, Johnny Depp filing the lawsuit against his ex-wife over that 2018 op-ed that she wrote in the Washington Post, which she referred to herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what I need you to do, I need to give the forms back to you. When you find for a defamatory statement, one or more, you need to fill out the compensatory damages. It has to be at least $1 for compensatory damages and up to whatever you feel the damages should be. And for punitive damages, you can put a 0 there, or you can fill out that as well, but I need those lines filled out, okay? All right, so if I can have you retire back to the deliberation room and do that for me, okay?
Well, the judge did review the jury forms, as is custom in every courtroom in the country, to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's were crossed, and they weren't. The jury didn't finish its job. We do know that somebody won here.
Recess till we hear back from them. Don't go too far.
All right.
Okay.
So they didn't. Court dismissed there because the jury didn't finish their job. They did find, gathering from what the judge just said, that the jury found that there was defamation here. We don't know which side it would have been on, or both. All those possibilities are alive, but they didn't name a figure of damages, money damages, for whomever had been defamed in their verdict. It is the next step, and they didn't take it. And that could take a little while. It could take a long while. So we are without a verdict at this point. We got one, at least a partial verdict, but we don't know what it is. So for more, let's bring in ABC News legal contributors Brian Buckmeyer and Terry Austin, along with our Kenneth Moten, who joins us live from Fairfax, Virginia, outside the courthouse. Kenneth, I want to go to you first. There you are, in the sweltering heat, ready for a verdict. And we didn't get it. What's the scene like there?
No, we didn't, but after nearly 13 hours of deliberations, this jury of 7 people, 5 men and 2 women, have reached a verdict, and somebody won. But as you just mentioned, Terry, we've got a partial verdict. I don't think I've seen this happen, at least in recent memory, of something of this magnitude, a case of this magnitude, because remember, we were told that there was a verdict 1 hour ago. So during this 1 hour gap, the fact that the jury didn't complete its job and the judge saw that, and that punitive damages were not specified on the jury form, that's just incredible to me. And you've covered the courts for a long time as well, so I'm curious to know what you think of that. But behind me, you see this crowd of people that's gathered. I will say, you mentioned, Terry, that it's sweltering here. It's about 91 degrees here in Fairfax, Virginia, outside this courthouse. There was nobody out here except for the media about an hour and 10 minutes ago. And then as you see a police presence that is happening here outside this courthouse to keep things calm and orderly, then you started to see people trickle in. And you see right behind me, I'm going to step out for just a second so we can zoom in and I can show you the crowd that's gathered outside this courthouse. You can see that a number of these people actually appear to be here in support of actor Johnny Depp. They are holding signs in support saying justice for Johnny. There is someone dressed in a Pirates of the Caribbean costume as well. A little bit of a sideshow, a little bit of a circus here. But we saw throngs and crowds of people outside this 6-week trial during the course of this 6-week trial. And here, now that we finally have a verdict in this case, this high-profile celebrity Hollywood case here, we've got these people who are showing up here ready to hear the verdict. And again, you just heard the judge say there's partial work that's been done here by the jury. We have a verdict. Somebody won, it appears, but we don't know who at this point. Again, just to go over the details, $50 million defamation suit by Johnny Depp, $100 million countersuit by his ex-wife, Amber Heard. This trial over the 6-week period, it got nasty. We had a litany of lurid details that came out about their very short 15-month marriage, and it all happened. Johnny Depp's lawsuit all sparked after a 2018 op-ed that was written in the Washington Post by Amber Heard, and saying that essentially the allegations that she made of sexual assault, sexual violence, it ruined his career. And she said the same about him. And so as we wait for this verdict, we also know that Johnny Depp is not even in the country. He was performing in London and the UK yesterday. His attorney says he had other and prior work commitments, but Amber Heard's camp came out with a scathing statement, very short, that said that your presence shows your priorities, essentially. And it says a lot that Johnny Depp is not here in Fairfax, Virginia, inside that courtroom at this hour as that verdict prepares to be read.
All right, we've got a lot to talk about here as we wait, because we really don't know how long we will be waiting. Terry, Brian, let's bring you into this conversation. What do you think, Terry? How long could this take? Are you surprised by what we just saw in the courtroom? Also, the fact that Johnny Depp isn't in the courtroom. Okay, we understand prior work, but we're talking about a lot of money and a story that's basically topped the headlines all across the globe. I mean, there's a lot of people that are interested in this. You would think he'd be in the courtroom.
Well, absolutely, Kira. I would be there if I were him, but I think he had this prior commitment. He sent a statement saying, look, I am away, but I am listening. But I do think it would mean a lot to the jury if he had been there. As for what exactly happened, I think the judge did not look at that jury form until it was brought out for the reading. Otherwise, she probably would have sent the jury back. Clearly, someone has been found to have defamed the other. And the question is, how much will they get? Because they were left blank, both on the compensatory and the punitive, my thought is it won't be a lot of money because they weren't thinking about a lot of money. Maybe they don't understand what compensatory is. Maybe they don't understand what punitive is, but they need to go back, figure that out now that they have determined at least one of those parties did defame the other.
And Brian, I want to ask you about what's going on here. and explain a question I have. I'm not a lawyer. I play one on TV, but I'm not. And so my question is, can both sides, look, they both accused the other of defaming them. So could both sides be found to have defamed the other? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Terry, you're not a lawyer, but you know a few things. I think the famous Jay-Z lyrics, you can check that out later. But you are correct. You can say that both sides are liable. And I think Terry Austin kind of hit the nail on the head. Because the damages wasn't at the forefront of what the jury is thinking, that they're not putting it down either in compensatory or in punitive. I think their focus was on liability. Who defamed who? And as Terry said, and I don't mean to reiterate it, we may see them come back out pretty quickly. Maybe they just throw down a few numbers here or there. I know that I don't think in terms of the millions of dollars. I can't imagine the average citizen or any one of these jurors are thinking in terms of millions of dollars. So if you're deciding who gets 50, 60, 70, 80, because don't forget, Amber Heard's attorney said, hey, we just put the $100 million kind of as a placeholder. You figure out what the compensatory damages are. You figure out what the punitive damages are, which, and again, I'm completely reading tea leaves, but if you leave a jury to decide damages and you don't give them that guidance and they come back not filling it out, in my mind, I don't think that lack of guidance was very memorable to the jury. And so this makes me think at least that Amber Heard's attorneys didn't really lead the jury well enough in kind of filling out the compensatory and the punitive damages. And when you look at Johnny Depp's closing, they were much more in terms of who's liable, who's defamed. And so in terms of timing, this little kind of slip up of the compensatory and punitive damages, I'm leaning to think that Johnny Depp might be coming out pretty much on top, even though I think he should be there in the court.
Okay, money aside, of course, we're all very interested to see what happens money-wise. Terry, what stood out to you as you followed this trial? Give us some highlights. Johnny Depp highlights, Amber Heard highlights.
You know, I think most of the highlights came from Johnny Depp's side. I mean, clearly when he did his rebuttal case, we saw Kate Moss come back on the stand, and she came back on the stand only because we heard Amber Heard mention her name. Otherwise, it would not have been let in. And I do think that the jury and the public looked at that and were pretty impressed that she came to do this testimony. I think Morgan Knight, if you remember, he was the Hicksville manager. He came in there and he talked about the fact that there was definitely not a lot of damage done, that there was that one light fixture. It totally, really just did not support what Amber Heard was saying. And I think the other Morgan in the case, Morgan Tremaine, he's the TMZ individual. If you remember, he got into a little spat with Elaine Breedenhoff, and frankly, I thought he was very colorful. I thought that he was very truthful and very credible, because people really understood that that's where the tape came from, Amber Heard. He got that video from Amber Heard. The only way they would have been able to put it on in 15 minutes is if they got it from the source, and they did. And that's just what she said, the opposite. So I think that that was very pivotal. The last thing I'll say as far as testimony was Amber Heard's testimony herself. I think when Camille Vasquez cross-examined her, both on the direct case and on the rebuttal, she got out some amazing information. And one of the pieces of information was for that sexual abuse when they were in Australia. How could Johnny Depp possibly sexually abuse her if his finger is cut off? I thought that was really good on Camille Vasquez's part.
And that testimony, of course, as I say, as we've been talking about, captivated the nation all around the world. People were watching. So I want to go back to Kenneth on the scene there at the courthouse in Fairfax, Virginia, and ask about the social phenomenon that this has become and what seems on social media to be an overwhelming pro-Johnny Depp bias, which has kind of caused a backlash among feminists who say this is the last thing women need, to see a woman who came forward and did have some evidence of bruises, some evidence from her witnesses that she had contemporaneous complaints that Johnny Depp had hit her, and she gets destroyed on social media. What's the atmosphere socially and there at the courthouse around these two antagonists in court?
Terry, many are calling this the TikTok trial because of the way this is played out on social media. And you actually had Amber Heard, who took the stand at one point and said she's getting death threats. She's being harassed on social media because of this trial, because of the testimony and the statements and the developments and details that have come out of this trial. And so what we see here is you see people here behind me, you see the people in front of the courthouse here waiting for this verdict, waiting to find out what the jury decided here. There is a buzz. And I will say that social media probably brought a lot of these people out here at this hour, those who didn't know why this case was happening in Fairfax, Virginia, some who didn't know it was happening in Fairfax at all until they saw not only the news, but they started to see it on social media as the headlines from Instagram to TikTok, they really started to play out here. And I will say, if you take a look, I want to actually zoom out here and show you that we have a lot of media that, of course, is out here, as I'm showing you a little bit behind the scenes, typically of big court cases that we see here on the other side of this tent. And this setup is actually where the microphones are for the press conference that we are expecting to happen. We are not sure, and we have not confirmed a news conference will happen with either party, but it is set up for them just in case, and we will bring that to you live right here on ABC News Live if and when it happens. And then you see right here behind me is more and more people who have gathered once they found out, once we put out the alert, once the media put out the alert that a verdict had been reached. That happened, around 1:30 or so, and then it was around 2 o'clock. We started to see that foot traffic outside the Fairfax County Courthouse really pick up here. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a lot of support for Johnny Depp. We saw that support throughout social media, and that's why you saw Amber Heard take the stand saying that this social media phenomenon of this trial, these dueling defamation suits here, cases, has really is impacting me, has impacted my case. And obviously the judge is stickler for the rules, trying to make sure that whatever happened in the gallery, what happened on social media didn't infiltrate this case and potentially have an impact. We will see what side the jury came down on. Hopefully that will happen in just a few minutes, but a little bit of surprise turn of events at the top of 3 there when the jury hadn't completed its job.
Well, the jury hadn't completed its job, and the job could be simple or very difficult. And I want to go to Brian at that. This is now, the assignment the jury has now is how do you express the damage that someone suffered, whichever side, both sides were defamed, in monetary terms. As I say, that can be a difficult question. That can sometimes, in cases, you have actual sort of guidelines. You know how much the medical costs were if somebody was physically injured, or even psychologically, the care that they might have had. In this case, how you already mentioned, Brian, that you didn't think that Amber Heard's lawyer gave the jury much guidance. How will they go about deciding the question? They haven't. And I mean, this could take a while, it seems to me, depending on the jurors, who they are and how they solve problems like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think, because again, we don't know who won yet. We know that someone's liable, but I do think we would see a quicker decision based on damages for Johnny Depp than we would for Amber Heard, just simply by the fact that Johnny Depp is making the argument that this hit his pocket. It hit his pocket and in turn also hurt his reputation. And he can calculate based on the franchises that he's been in. We know how much Johnny Depp has made in the past and how much he would likely make in the future based on him being one of Hollywood's biggest actors, especially at the beginning of Pirates of the Caribbean and then even somewhat through the rest. Of course, the movies kind of dwindled in how much they were bringing, but we know how much of an actor he is. But if you just simply ask the question, if the jury is coming back with Amber Heard winning this case, what's the dollar amount for what she accused Johnny Depp of? What's the dollar amount for the death threats that she's saying she's getting, the backlash that she's saying she's getting, this sexual assault? I think if it's damages for Amber Heard, we may be here for a
We're going to take you back in the courtroom.
Judge, back on the bench now, so let's see what's going on. Was Depp's. All right, so once again, the jury back in. Didn't take them long. Here they come, we assume, with the answer to the judge's question. How much?
Pointing out that Brian said, he brought up an interesting point.
Brian said that the Depp lawyers gave a roadmap for the jury to reach a monetary amount, and if they ended up with a verdict with no money on it, maybe Johnny Depp didn't win here. We're going to see. Judge looking over the verdict forms there. Make sure they've dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's this time.
All right, Mr. Foreperson, is this the verdict of the jury?
Yes.
All right, is it unanimous?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Jamie?
In civil case number CL 2019-2911, Mr. Depp's claim against Ms. Heard. 1. As to the statement appearing in the online op-ed entitled, Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change. In the Washington Post online edition, quote, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change, end quote. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes. Has Mr. Depp proven by a greater weight of the evidence that, question, the statement was made or published by Ms. Heard? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was about Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was false? Answer, yes. Question, the statement has a defamatory implication about Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Question, the defamatory implication was designed and intended by Ms. Heard? Answer, yes. Question, due to circumstances surrounding the publication of the statement, it conveyed a defamatory implication to someone who saw it other than Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven by clear and convincing evidence that Ms. Heard acted with actual malice? Answer, yes. 2. As to the statement appearing in the op-ed entitled A Transformative Moment for Women in the Washington Post print edition and the online op-ed, Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change, in the Washington Post online edition. Quote, then 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out, end quote. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes. Has Mr. Depp proven by a greater weight of the evidence that, question, the statement was made or published by Ms. Heard? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was about Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was false? Answer, yes. Question, the statement has a defamatory implication about Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Question, the defamatory implication was designed and intended by Ms. Heard? Answer, yes. Question, due to circumstances surrounding the publication of the statement, it conveyed a defamatory implication to someone who saw it other than Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven by clear and convincing evidence that Ms. Heard acted with actual malice? Answer, yes. 3. As to the statement appearing in the op-ed entitled A Transformative Moment for Women in the Washington Post print edition and the online op-ed, Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change, in the Washington Post online edition. Quote, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse, end quote. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes. Has Mr. Depp proven by a greater weight of the evidence that, question, the statement was made or published by Ms. Heard? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was about Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was false? Answer, yes. Question, the statement has a defamatory implication about Mr. Depp. Answer, yes. Question, the defamatory implication was designed and intended by Ms. Heard. Answer, yes. Question, due to circumstances surrounding the publication of this statement, it conveyed a defamatory implication to someone who saw it other than Mr. Depp. Answer, yes. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven by clear and convincing evidence that Ms. Heard acted with actual malice? Answer, yes. As against Amber Heard, we, the jury, award compensatory damages in the amount of $10 million. As against Amber Heard, we, the jury, award punitive damages in the amount of $5 million. In civil case number CL 2019-2911, Ms. Heard's claim against Mr. Depp. 1. As to this statement, appearing in the April 8, 2020 online edition of the Daily Mail, quote, Amber Heard and her friends in the media use fake sexual violence allegations as both a sword and shield, depending on their needs. They have selected some of her sexual violence hoax facts as the sword, inflicting them on the public and Mr. Depp. Do you find that Ms. Heard has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, no. 2. As to this statement, appearing in the April 27, 2020 online edition of the Daily Mail, quote, quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax. They set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first attempt did not do the trick. The officers came to the penthouses, thoroughly searched and interviewed, and left after seeing no damage to face or property. So Amber and her friends spilled a little wine and roughed the place up, got their story straight under the direction of a lawyer and publicist, and then placed a second call to 911, end quote. Do you find that Ms. Heard has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes. Has Ms. Heard proven by a greater weight of the evidence that, question, Mr. Waldman, while acting as an agent for Mr. Depp, made or published the statement? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was about Ms. Heard. Answer, yes. Question, the statement was seen by someone other than Ms. Heard. Answer, yes. Question, the statement was false. Answer, yes. Do you find that Ms. Heard has proven by clear and convincing evidence that the statement by Mr. Waldman was made with actual malice? Answer, yes. 3. As to this statement, appearing in the April 27, 2020 online edition of the Daily Mail, quote, we've reached the beginning of the end of Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp, end quote. Do you find that Ms. Heard has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, no. As against John C. Depp II, we, the jury, award compensatory damages in the amount of $2 million. As against John C. Depp II, we, the jury, award punitive damages in the amount of $0.
All right. Does either side wish to have the jury polled?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Jamie?
Members of the jury, if this is your verdict, please answer yes. If this is not your verdict, please answer no. Juror number 6. Yes. Juror number 10.
Yes.
Juror number 15.
Yes.
Juror number 16.
Yes.
Juror number 22.
Yes.
Juror number 27.
Yes.
Juror number 29.
Yes.
All right. I do find that the jury's verdict is unanimous. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes your service in this case. I want to thank you again for your dedication and your hard work during this trial. And I know I speak for everybody here when I tell you that we appreciate your sacrifices and your time and your public service in this matter, okay? So I'm going to have you go back to the jury deliberation room for one more time, and then we'll release you from there, okay? All right, thank you. Okay. In accordance with law, I will amend the punitive damages award to the statutory cap of $350,000 on Mr. Depp's award. Okay. I will set this down for entry of an order. And can we do it on June 24th at 10 a.m. if that's available? All right.
Yes,
Mr. Chu, if you could prepare that order and then circulate it to Ms. Bretterhoff, and we can have all the objections noted on it. All right.
We'll do that, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
All right. And if I get it before that date, I'll take it off the docket. Okay. All right. Again, thank you to all the attorneys for your professionalism, and you're welcome to come to my courtroom anytime. Well, give me a few weeks, but then you can come anytime. Okay. All right. Court is adjourned.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Well, there you have it. A substantial verdict for Johnny Depp, but not complete. A devastating defeat, really, for Amber Heard, although she did win on one count. And let me explain this. So there was the case of Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. He said she had defamed him. The jury agreed on all three counts. On the title of the op-ed in the Washington Post, which was the first count, Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. The jury found that that was defamatory. On a line in that op-ed, 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. And the jury found that that was defamatory. And the third statement in that Washington Post op-ed was, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse. And the jury found that that was defamatory. They awarded her $10 million in compensatory, awarded him. They awarded Johnny Depp $10 million in compensatory damages, $5 million in punitive damages. Then, in the case of Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp, they decided that on one issue, on one statement of Johnny Depp's lawyers to the Daily Mail, that was defamatory. What he said was quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax about a charge of abuse, that they set up Mr. Depp by calling the cops, but it didn't do the trick. That passage of Johnny Depp's lawyer's statement to the Daily Mail, the jury found defamed Amber Heard. And they said that the calling her complaint in that instance a hoax was defamatory. So they found for Amber Heard, they awarded her $2 million of compensatory damages. So the bottom line, they did not believe most of what Amber Heard had to say. And
Both of them were dishonest.
Yes, to some extent. And they wrecked her life financially. Unless she gets this reduced on appeal, which she might, she's got $13 million that she owes Johnny Depp.
So let's bring in Terry, Brian, also our Ken Moten, who's there outside the courthouse. And Kenneth, I see that people are lining up there at the doors, so I think we should pay attention. If you are hearing something, any kind of reaction from those out there, especially if we see Amber Heard walk out, it'll be interested to listen in and see what's said. So keep us honest there. It seems pretty quiet now. But Brian, why don't we start with you? First of all, overall reaction to what we just heard.
Yeah, I'm somewhat shocked by the mixed bag that we have in terms of this verdict, so to speak, where Johnny Depp, and I think what he's going to be really proud about and his team should be proud about, is just the yes after yes after yes after yes. I don't think the dollar amount is, one, what he was really seeking. Two, I don't think $15 million is even going to pay for two of the multiple lawyers who are on this team. So for that, I don't think it's a big deal for him. But hearing yes that many times to things like defamation, false statement, that it was published, actual malice, I think this furthers the point that not only is Johnny Depp winning in the court of law, but even more so the court of public opinion. And I think this is a huge win, even though the dollar amount is far less than what he was asking for.
Terry, I'm just curious, you know, from the number of trials that we've covered that involved sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual violence, How much is this a setback just for victims' rights and victims of domestic abuse and violence? The fact that the jury found that she is liable here for defamation, that they didn't believe her story. This is not good for women around the country who are sitting back going, there we go again. We just lost a voice here.
You know what, Kira, you hit it on the head. It makes it far more difficult for women who really have suffered from sexual violence or abuse to come forward because they will be afraid that they too might not be believed. I do think, however, that Amber Heard is the type of individual that the jury saw lied constantly. And I do think that that is why we saw all of the yeses that Brian was referencing as far as the 3 statements that Depp was claiming was defamatory, because Heard did lie. She was caught in multiple lies. And so I'm grateful that he, won his part of the case because of all of the lies. And the question really is, I don't think it will happen, but whether or not she will be brought up for perjury charges. I do think the jury looked at this very carefully. I'm not shocked that they came back in one instance in favor of Amber Heard, because that one statement wasn't quite accurate. The fact that we had Waldman stating that they called the police, they called them back, I think based on the evidence the jury saw, that wasn't exactly right. But I think Camille Vasquez talked about that in her closing and said, he thought it was right. He actually said that he thought that Amber Heard should be brought up for perjury. So he believed it was right. So there's no actual malice. The jury looked at that and said, well, but you were wrong. And so they gave that to Amber Heard. It was a small amount, $2 million, no punitive. I think overall, this is a huge victory for Johnny Depp. And I think basically the jury took their job very seriously, looked at all the evidence, and came back relatively quickly, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's a great point, Terry. The fact that this is a mixed verdict, that they looked so carefully at each statement, excuse me, and they matched it to those questions that Brian was saying. Was the statement made by this defendant? Was it made with actual malice? Did other people hear it the same way? With clear and convincing evidence, the yes, yes, yes. It basically said they thought that Amber Heard lied to them and that she had not proved, at any rate, what she was saying. But Kenneth, I want to go to you first. I want to show a little bit of tape here. The reaction outside the courthouse, you've already told us, a lot of Johnny Depp fans out there. Here's what it looked like. There you go. When they hear that Johnny Depp had been awarded a major victory here.
A major victory for these fans of Johnny Depp. Terry, I can say that while there is the legal court inside that building behind me, there's the court of public opinion also right here in front of this building. And a number of Johnny Depp fans came out here. They've been out here during the 6-week trial. We haven't seen that many fans of Amber Heard. But for the ones who came out here for Johnny Depp, with every single yes from that jury foreperson, there was an eruption. There was applause. There were people chanting, this crowd chanting Johnny, Johnny, Johnny over and over again. And you see they are still behind me, even though the jury's work has essentially wrapped up here and the verdict's been read. A big win for Johnny Depp, as our analysts have pointed out here. They are waiting to potentially see the attorneys for the Depp camp to come out and potentially speak. We don't expect to see Amber Heard, who's been making her comings and goings from this building, from the back of the building. And because she was not a winner in this case, or a big winner, we do not expect to see her or her team out here at the microphones, but we're ready for them just in case. We are starting to see some people file out of the courtroom as well, since that verdict has been read. But again, 91 degrees out here at the moment this verdict was read. People standing for quite some time to hear what the verdict was, and we saw them reacting majorly here after every single yes in favor of Johnny Depp.
As we just wait there outside the courthouse and, keep us honest on what's happening there, Kenneth, we did get a statement from Amber Heard. I'll just go ahead and read this cold here. It's an official statement from Amber Heard regarding the verdict that we just heard. The disappointment I feel today is beyond words. I'm heartbroken that the mountain of evidence still was not enough to stand up to the disproportionate power, influence, and sway of my ex-husband. I'm even more disappointed with what this verdict means for other women. It is a setback. It sets back the clock to a time when a woman who spoke up and spoke out could be publicly shamed and humiliated. It sets back the idea that violence against women is to be taken seriously. I believe Johnny's attorneys succeeded in getting the jury to overlook the key issue of freedom of speech and ignore evidence that was so conclusive that we won in the UK. I'm sad I lost this case, but I am sadder still that I seem to have lost a right I thought I had as an American to speak freely and openly.
Well, she's obviously still persuaded in her own case, as she should be. But I'd say, in general, having covered a lot of trials, juries, as we've seen in this case, they take their job very seriously. A lot of people don't like the verdict if they haven't watched the trial. The more people have watched the trial, it turns out the more they tend to agree with juries. Not all the time, obviously, but they tend to take it very seriously. And I do want to go to Brian on this verdict and what it says about the evidence that Amber Heard brought. It's her word, really, as it's going to be. And now she says women will be forced back into silence if they want to complain about abuse by a powerful man in particular. Is there validity in that? Is that what this verdict says, Brian, do you think?
I understand that sentiment in part, and I disagree with it in another part. And the reason why I say that is I do agree that there are going to be women, young girls, throughout the world and especially the country, and look at what happened here and says, maybe Amber Heard was right, that she faced the backlash and the wrath of going after a very powerful man, because that is what Johnny Depp is. He's a very powerful man. But I hope that the women listening to this and watching this trial, as Terry has so eloquently put forward, that there's a very big difference between Amber Heard and the women who came out against R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein, and so many other men who are perpetrators of sexual violence towards women. And I think in their testimony, in the facts that came forward, which were scrutinized to a very high level, and they should be, just so we can make sure we get justice, Amber Heard was very different than all the other women who we found to be victims based on the criminal justice system. And I think, and I hope that women see that difference. I hope when they see the testimony that she gave forward outside of the TikTok and the short little videos, and they see the truth that was here and that was found through cross-examination in this case. And the last thing that I think was interesting is what got slipped in there just in the end, the punitive damages seem to be capped. I know that Johnny Depp was awarded $5 million, but I think the judge, and correct me if I'm wrong, capped it at the statutory level of $350,000. And so the dollar amount may change a little in the future, depending on how that works out. But my hope, at least, is that this does not cause a chilling effect and that people can see the difference between her testimony and true victims of sexual abuse.
That's right. With regard to punitive damages in the state of Virginia, they're capped at $350,000. Terry, question for you, either Terry or Brian or Kenneth, you guys jump in, but Terry, if you know, the part of the statement where Amber Heard said, I believe Johnny's attorney succeeded in getting the jury to overlook the key issue of freedom of speech and ignore evidence that was so conclusive that we won in the UK. Remind us about the case in the UK.
Well, Amber's team, and actually it wasn't Amber's team, it was the son that was the subject of that lawsuit. They won that case, and there was a ton of evidence there, but their system is a little bit different from here. There were statements that were admitted into the court, and the judge decided that case and ultimately decided that, Johnny Depp basically didn't have any sort of defamation claim as far as the son was concerned. But this is a very different case, and I think that they chose wisely when they decided to sue Amber Heard herself for the statements that she made and didn't sue the Washington Post. That would have been a little bit more difficult. And Johnny Depp said himself, this was about his reputation. He wanted to make sure that people understood, get all of that information here. And the thing I want us to remember about Amber Heard, she's talking about the facts and the evidence in this case. And you remember on one of those videos and the audios, we heard her talking about, why would you ever bring a case, Johnny? There's so much against you. I have all of this evidence. The difference is she has a lot of evidence of lies. It's not facts, and it's not, I don't think that this verdict is going to really set back other women so much, because it's not the lack of evidence that something happened. It is the fact that she lied so often, and the jury just did not believe her. So I definitely think at the end of the day, this was the right result, and people who actually are abused will be able to bring their case. They won't have to show that they went to the doctor, because they won't be lying. They will be telling the truth.
And that is the point, that the punitive, explains Terry, the punitive damages here. It's not just that they found that Johnny Depp's career was damaged, and so they compensated him with what they said was $10 million worth of damage. It's that they believed she should be punished for this conduct, and it's the lies, as Terry points out, that were likely the source of that. She was caught in what Depp's lawyers successfully argued with the jury were lies, and juries don't like to be lied to. That's a bad thing if you've been caught in a lie, and that seems to be what happened here. And Kenneth, I want to go to you out there about this portrait of Amber Heard that emerged in this case. As I say, there's a social media version of a trial, which is a cartoon version usually, because people are full of clever snark and want to be mean and clever and all that stuff. And then there's what happened in the courtroom. Now, they may have come together in some degree here, but there was these moments on the witness stand which were very difficult for Amber Heard, because it turned out she just could not explain why the facts that were being proved were contrary to her statements.
And the jury just didn't believe her, Terry. I mean, this is a trial that, again, when it played out over the 6 weeks, I said earlier that it was a litany of lurid details. The jury had to sit there and listen through this testimony and those changing stories from Amber Heard, and they just didn't believe her. And what you saw playing out in the court of public opinion was something very similar. And you saw some very nasty vitriol, just really kind of horrific comments that were also made toward Amber Heard, who said on the stand at one point, I am a human being going through this. This is, my life, my story. And as she was trying to convince this jury that she was defamed by her ex-husband, as those details came out, the jury sat there and really heard testimony of a very dysfunctional couple, a very short 15 months of marriage there, this relationship that played out. And what they heard, again, they didn't believe because of the changing stories. And so when it hit the court of public opinion, as those details and some of the most salacious details came out on TikTok and other social media platforms, you saw this very rabid base of people who went after Amber Heard, who stood up for Johnny Depp. There are a number of people who came out here the moment they heard there was a verdict that was going to be read, that a verdict had been reached, who wanted to be here for this moment here. And that's why you're seeing people in costume with signs that say justice for Johnny, as they chanted Johnny, Johnny, Johnny over and over again as the verdict was being read. But as it played out on social media definitely played a role in the court of public opinion. It's people who were potentially not paying attention to every single nugget or detail from the testimony. They were getting it from social media, and some would say they were getting one side, one version of the story, of the testimony that was playing out here in court. They weren't getting the full story. But for those who did watch the live streams, did watch every single detail, they had an opinion as well, and they shared it. They shared it on social media. This civil case with big numbers, 50 million, 100 million in damages that could be awarded in these dueling defamation cases here. And it seems that a lot of people had something to say about it. And yes, there's a lot of media attention because it is an actor who is very well known. known, and his less famous ex-wife, Amber Heard. But you see a lot of attention and a lot of focus on some of the allegations that were made. And yes, there's some larger conversation that can happen that the attorneys for Amber Heard tried to point out in closing arguments, that they were actually, there was a motion that was filed by Johnny Depp's team asking the judge to tell the jury to exclude what was said by Amber Heard's team during the closing, where they said that a ruling against Heard sends a message that no matter what you do as an abuse victim, you always have to do more. That quote went on to say, no matter how honest you are about your own imperfections and your own shortcomings in a relationship, you have to be perfect in order for people to believe you. Don't send that message. The judge ultimately decided not to tell the jury to disregard that. Johnny Depp's team, they said that the Amber Heard's side was trying to make the jury award or decide a verdict, weigh the fact that this is a larger social issue when it comes to domestic violence, what happens between a couple. But the jury seemed like they took that 13 hours, including the question that they came back with yesterday, asking about how much should they weigh on the headline of that Washington Post op-ed from 2018, and should they weigh the content of the article as well. And we know what the jury instructions were, and it appears that they went over it. Even though 13 hours doesn't seem like much, it appears that this jury went over it with a fine-tooth comb, and we are waiting, hoping that we actually hear from one or two or many people who sat on this 7-person jury to figure out what was happening in the deliberation room.
You know, talking about the internet reaction to all of this, you know, Kenneth referring to this as the TikTok trial, we've heard that. So there's a number of publications have sort of gathered the numbers of the internet reaction and from Twitter to all kinds of platforms. Apparently, Depp fans dominated social media using a few specific hashtags to voice support for the actor and to basically hurl insults at Heard. The most popular hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp received more than 15 billion views on TikTok. 15 billion views on TikTok. Somewhat corresponding the hashtag Justice for Amber Heard, 51 million views. And a lot of those videos apparently gathered negative toward Heard, despite the hashtag. Many videos using these hashtags, supercuts from trial footage, which are edited to make Heard's accusations appear unfounded. Brian, your reaction, I'd be Terry and Kenneth too, but just how the internet impacted public opinion, Brian, and from TikTok to all these other platforms, and just looking at those numbers and how many people viewed what was going on throughout the days of this trial.
So many people. So Terry and I are both hosts of the Law and Crime Daily show, and we put out a video, we put out 2 words about Johnny Depp, and at least 100,000 people are watching. As we're talking now, I think just as Kenneth was giving us an update, a friend of mine said that we are currently on TikTok right now. Someone sent a screenshot of the 5 of us and saying, Brian, I think you're on TikTok talking about Johnny Depp and the verdict. And so this is huge in terms of the support that Johnny Depp got. It was like a revitalization of his career. And then to bring it into the legal aspect, I think a major question that a lot of the lawyers, especially Amber Heard's lawyers, are going to have is, did this affect the jury? If I'm Amber Heard's attorneys right now, I am waiting and praying that I get to speak with every one of those jurors, especially because they had this case over the long weekend and they were not sequestered. And I'm asking the question, did you see anything? Because the volume, as you said, in the 15 billion retweets on the hashtag alone, the volume of the support for Johnny Depp has to be begging the question, at least for Heard's attorneys, did this affect the jury's decision? But this was impressive. This was bigger than anything. And I've covered Weinstein, R. Kelly, Ahmaud Arbery, Derek Chauvin. This blows out every case I've ever seen before.
So we have a statement from, you want me to read this?
Sure.
Okay, we've got a statement now from Johnny Depp. And by the way, doesn't it look like it's typed from a typewriter?
It does.
The statement actually looks like it's been typed on an old typewriter. I have a few of those in my home, believe it or not. So let me do the best. I'll read this, and we've got graphics as well. Johnny Depp saying, 6 years ago, my life, the life of my children, the lives of those closest to me, and also the lives of the people who for many, many years have supported and believed in me were forever changed, all in the blink of an eye. False, very serious, and criminal allegations were levied at me via the media, which triggered an endless barrage of hateful content, although no charges were ever brought against me. It had already traveled around the world twice within a nanosecond, and it had a seismic impact on my life and my career. And 6 years later, the jury gave me my life back. I am truly humbled. My decision to pursue this case, knowing very well the height of the legal hurdles that I would be facing and the inevitable worldwide spectacle into my life, was only made after considerable thought. Finally, he wraps it up by saying, or by typing, from the very beginning, the goal of bringing this case was to reveal the truth, regardless of the outcome. Speaking the truth was something that I owed to my children and to all those who have remained steadfast in their support of me. I feel at peace knowing I have finally accomplished that.
And a couple of things there. First, he talks about why he did it. He said he did it for his children. He talks about how as soon as she made the allegation in the Washington Post, or what was taken to be the allegation that he had abused her, it went around the world. That reminds me of the old Mark Twain line, a lie can go around the world while truth is just putting its pants on. And that's what he suffered, he says. And he said he did this for his kids. And I think that gets at something. Look, on social media, we've been talking about it's all good fun. Everybody's making jokes and being clever. What we saw was enormous personal pain in the breakup of this marriage. Anyone who's been through it knows it. And sometimes the camera will distance people from that. And so we hear in both these statements what it cost to have this court fight. Let's go back to Kenneth Moton. Something happening there at the courthouse. Johnny Depp's team walking out.
Yes. They are walking up to the microphones, so cut me off if they start talking. We believe that they will give a statement in just a moment. You heard them coming out to applause. Let's take a listen if we have a camera on that microphone over there. Where's Mr. Depp?
Hi, everyone. Today's verdict confirms what we have said from the beginning, that the claims against Johnny Depp are defamatory and unsupported by any evidence. We are grateful, so grateful to the jury for their careful deliberation, to the judge and the court staff who have devoted an enormous amount of time and resources towards this case.
Our judicial system is predicated on each person's right to have his or her case heard, and we were honored, truly honored, to assist Mr. Depp in ensuring that his case was fairly considered throughout the trial. We are also most pleased that the trial has resonated for so many people in the public who value truth and justice. Now that the jury has reached its conclusive verdict, it's time to turn the page and look to the future. Thank you all so much. Thanks to the jury.
Thank you so much.
Let's go. Have you spoken to Johnny? How is he feeling? How's Johnny feeling? Will Johnny and Amber ever speak to each other again? Is this the end of the matter? Miss Vasquez, will there be any more legal action?
For Johnny Depp and his career. I mean, that's what he came forward and said, that this case, what Amber Heard had said about him, what went public, what traveled around the world, ruined his career, ruined his ability to get work. What could be next now for Johnny Depp? Does he get back into the mix? Does he start getting even more work now?
It could end up helping him. I said that, as his lawyers said, this came at a tremendous cost to him. Personally, emotionally, psychologically, to her too. This is the breakup of a marriage that didn't work, and they were bitter. You could tell they hated each other, and at times there were even moments in that trial where you could sense their romance when they both talked about how hard they fell for each other. There's deep sadness in this case, but what it means for Johnny Depp is that he gets a fresh start, and he also gets to collect, if he can, the punitive damages capped in Virginia, but he's looking at a $10 million payday. And I guess there's no question that Amber Heard will appeal that award. Let's go back to Kenneth on that issue. Kenneth?
Yeah, Terry, I'm sorry it was a little hard to hear you because this sums up this case. Take a look. You saw the lawyers after giving that very short statement, and you see not only just the throngs of media, but you also see just regular, everyday folks, many of them fans of Johnny Depp, who are surrounding those attorneys as they were walking to their vehicles. The Fairfax Sheriff's Department trying to get them safely to those vehicles as well. But this is the circus that is happening outside this courthouse as people reacted to that verdict being reached. Every yes, this crowd was very cheerful, celebratory atmosphere that's happening out here. We can tell you that Amber Heard has left this courthouse. She left from the back of this building, and she was we tried to yell some questions to her, but we got nothing from her or her team besides the very lengthy statement that Kira read out on the air just moments ago. But as you see here, a lot of attention on this TikTok trial, as we've called it, something that this area in Fairfax County has not seen before when it comes to this type of case, this type of civil case, and what was at stake here. But as you see the attorneys leaving after that very short statement, so many people around here celebrating Johnny Depp's win.
You know, one final thought. You say in the courtroom, Terry, that it talked about how they really loved each other, fell for each other, had this relationship. But, I mean, can we all play counselor, not the lawyer counselor, for a minute? I mean, if you really, truly love somebody that much, would you put them through what you just did? I think it was a fast and furious Hollywood relationship and marriage, and boy, did they both learn a very expensive and tragic lesson through all this.
And I wonder if I can go to Terry Austin on this about that award. That is ruinous. Look, I mean, let's face facts. In Hollywood, it's cruel to women who cross a certain age barrier. Amber Heard is a moderately successful actor. She's going to have difficulty getting parts in the real world of Hollywood. She's now looking at 8 figures that she's got to come up with for Johnny Depp, unless that can be reduced on appeal. How likely is that? How does that work?
I think it's very unlikely that she will win an appeal. I think she will appeal the decision, but you have to have reversible error. And I think the judge in this case was excellent. She let in evidence that should come in, and she didn't allow evidence that should not come in. And so I don't think they're going to find any grounds for appeal at all, although that's going to be the automatic next step. And I don't think she's going to get the amount of the verdict reduced because it's quite reasonable. If you recall, obviously, they were asking for $50 million and $100 million, and the jury awarded, very reasonable amounts. The $10 million for compensatory as far as Depp is concerned, and even though those punitive damages were reduced from $500,000 to $350,000 because of the statutory requirement in Virginia, it's still a substantial amount of money. And that $2 million that we know that Heard is going to get from the Depp team, that too is quite reasonable. Obviously, at the end of the day, Depp is not going to be paying anything because his award was so much greater. But I think there is going to be no grounds to do anything as far as this verdict is concerned. It's fair, it's reasonable, it's well thought out. There are no grounds for appeal. And I think she's going to have to just move on from here. And that's the right thing to do.
Terry, Brian, Kenneth, if there's one thing we learned, money and love, they both hurt tremendously. Thank you all so much for leading through all this coverage with us. We appreciate it.
And thank you guys. Thank you for watching. We'll keep on the what happens next in this case on appeal and in the court of public opinion. I'm Terry Moran. Remember, ABC News Live is available on all of your streaming devices, plus the ABC News app and abcnews.com, on Hulu, Amazon, Roku, Samsung TV, YouTube, lots of different places. The news continues right after this.